Alright, on our soft introduction to social science research methods in these first couple of videos, we are going to be looking at science and what it is and what makes science sciency. And then we're going to be looking at the relationship of data to theory and what those are. And then thinking about how we go through reasoning out problems in our head and real problems of knowledge. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, we're going to kind of start at a much more abstract level of thinking, what is science? What is the purpose of science? What does science do? Sociology and psychology, like all the sciences, are scientific. And the question then again is, what binds all these sciences together? What makes us similar to biology? What makes us similar to chemistry and physics? What does science do? Well, we can start to think about astronomy, for example. Astronomy is a science as well. People look up in the sky and they see that these stars that they start to recognize, but they also note that they only see some part of the year, or they might note that the sun moves across the sky. And they want to explain it. Now they might do it through an elaborate mythology, but science fundamentally seeks to explain. And to start with, they might have a theory. They might say, well, the sun is rotating around the earth. This is a theory. It's a proposition or a statement or an argument that is fundamentally trying to explain something about the world, right? So what makes a scientific theory is that it is one of these things. A proposition and a statement or an argument are essentially the same thing. But again, fundamentally tries to explain something about something we observe in the world, right? So while observation is part of doing science, science also begins with stuff that we've observed around us. Maybe we observe patterns in people who wear masks outside. I notice most younger white people are the ones who don't wear masks, for example. That's not a statement about anyone in particular. It's more just an observation. Right? But then I have to come up with a theory of that to try to explain it. Similarly, if someone comes up with a theory of trying to explain the movement of the sun, or why tides rise and fall. Right? So all scientific research essentially begins with a theory. So one of the most famous theories is the Davis-Moore hypothesis. And it begins with an observation that all societies have economic inequality. Some people with more money, some people with less. That's an observation. Right? And they say, okay, well, if all societies have inequality, then it must serve some purpose in society. It must serve some function. So that's a proposition. Right? We're starting with a theory. We're developing a theory based on the observation of all this inequality. And then proposition 2 is that economic inequality serves to incentivize or motivate people to do the hardest and most important jobs in society. Right? So again, what is this seeking to explain, we can ask ourselves. And also, how can we research it? Right? Because when we think about theories, it's important to realize theories are not answers to questions. Theories are where we begin the scientific process. Right? So if we take this idea that economic inequality motivates people to do the hardest jobs, well, then we have to think about maybe going out and looking at the different kinds of jobs, the kind of money people get for those jobs, and whether or not our observations, our data, confirm our theory. Right? So keep in mind also that theories often shape our fundamental assumptions. So if we go back to our previous slide, pardon me, think about that first proposition, that inequality must serve some social purpose because it's in all societies. That's a pretty big assumption. Right? It's important for their theory, but we want to put that in brackets because maybe it doesn't serve a social function. Right? They're assuming that it does, and then they get to what that function is. Now they might go out and prove or disprove whether it serves a purpose or function, but the assumption that it serves a purpose is very important. And we'll come back to what these assumptions are throughout the course. So maybe we go out and we look at some of the most important jobs out there, like doctors and CEOs and I guess lawyers or something. That would seem to confirm our theory. But then we look at some other really important jobs like, I don't know, teachers and nurses and people who keep our grocery stores stocked. What's the most important job is taken on a very different tone in the pandemic era. So maybe we need to go back and revise our theory. Maybe it doesn't really explain everything. And this is kind of the scientific process. Theories are these tentative explanations that we go out, we gather data, we literally sometimes observe or look. Sometimes we ask people questions or send them surveys. The point is that we need to get data to either confirm or disprove it. So scientific research essentially describes this process. The key thing is that we have to get empirical data or observation. Empirical means we go out and look. We make an observation. And this is kind of a tricky term because we think observation means observing and looking at. And sometimes it does. We actually go and we watch what people do. But we can also send them surveys, we can send them questionnaires, we can put them in an experiment. There are different ways of observing things out in the world. The important thing is that, one thing is that it's verifiable, that if you go out and you say, I talked to a bunch of people, that I can follow behind you. And that means that the way you get your observations, you get your data about your question, needs to be systematically done. And if it's systematically done, then I can go behind you and try to do the same thing you did and verify or disprove what you did, which is key to the scientific process. And so this is where a lot of our research designs and methods are going to come in, because they ensure that we're doing things in a systematic and rigorous way, and that it's clear what we're doing to others so that they can check our work and make sure we're not just making stuff up. And all of this is a way of creating knowledge about our social world.